The Interstellar Military Academy stood on a wide plateau of silver stone, high above the misty forests of Taravai. The air was thin but clean, and the sky often shimmered with the colors of distant ships entering orbit. Species from across the known systems came here to learn strategy, leadership, and cooperation. It was a place of sharp minds, proud traditions, and quiet rivalries. Cadet Varel of the Kareth Dominion walked through the central courtyard with the easy confidence of someone who had never failed at anything important. She was tall even for her kind, her natural plating catching the morning light like polished armor. Other cadets moved aside without being asked. Some did it out of respect. Others did it because Varel had a reputation for speaking her mind without softening the edges. She preferred it that way. Her tactical strategy cohort met in a circular hall lined with holographic projectors. The room was designed so no one sat at the front. Every cadet had an equal place at the ring-shaped table. At least, that was the idea. When Viel stepped inside, most of the seats were already taken. Tall, scaled bodies. Broad, furred shoulders. Multi-limbed forms adjusting data pads and whispering to one another. And then there was the human. He sat between a blue-skinned aquatic cadet and a thin insectile analyst from the outer colonies. He looked small, soft. No natural armor, no visible enhancements, no ceremonial markings. His uniform was plain gray with a simple patch that read, Sergeant Elias Ward, Earth Expeditionary Forces. He was writing something on a physical notepad instead of using a holo display. Varel stopped just long enough to stare. "That one?" she said to the cadet beside her, not bothering to lower her voice. "That's the human exchange soldier?" The scaled cadet gave a quiet nod. "Yes, arrived last cycle." Varel gave a short, amused sound. "I thought humans mostly sent diplomats." A few nearby cadets chuckled. The human did not look up. He kept writing. Varel took her seat directly across from him. The instructor, Commander Illyra, activated the central display. A rotating map of a resource-rich moon appeared, covered in colored zones. "Today," Illyra said, "you will plan a multi-species relief operation after a natural disaster. Infrastructure is damaged. Communications are unstable. Civilian panic is high. Your goal is not victory. Your goal is stability." Varel leaned back slightly. Relief planning was important, of course, but it was not exactly glorious. Still, strategy was strategy. As the scenario details scrolled, Elias Ward raised his hand. It surprised Varel. He had not spoken once in previous sessions. "Yes, Sergeant?" Irira said. His voice was calm and steady.
Do we have data on weather pattern shifts over the last 12 local cycles, especially wind direction near the western settlements?
Several cadets exchanged looks. "That information is incomplete," Illyra said. "Why?" "If winds are changing," Elias said, "airborne debris could make certain landing zones unsafe. We might need ground routes instead." Varel tilted her head. "Ground routes would take too long," she said. "Speed is critical in disaster response." He nodded once.
"Yes, ma'am. But a fast plan that fails costs more time than a slower plan that works." A few cadets made thoughtful noises.
Varel crossed her arms. "Or," she said, "we could use proper shielding and not worry about falling branches." Light laughter moved around the table. Elias didn't argue. He just wrote something down. As the exercise continued, Varel noticed a pattern she didn't like. Every time someone proposed a bold, impressive move, the human quietly asked about second-order effects. "What happens to local water supply if we land heavy transports there? Where will displaced civilians go after first aid? Which species on the ground can safely eat our emergency rations?" They were not dramatic questions. They were not clever sounding, but they kept forcing the group to adjust their plan. By the end of the session, their strategy looked very different from what Virel had first imagined. Slower, more complicated, focused on long-term stability instead of short-term display. Commander Illyra nodded in approval. "This is one of the most realistic plans I've seen from a first-pass group." Virel glanced across the table. The human was not smiling. He was erasing something and rewriting it. After class, cadets gathered in small clusters, replaying moments from the exercise. Virel joined a group near the tall windows overlooking the forests. "That human thinks like a logistics drone," one cadet said. "No instinct for decisive action. Maybe that's all humans are good for," another replied. "Support roles." Virel let out a soft snort. He kept asking permission before speaking, like he expected someone to tell him to be quiet. "Prey species behavior," someone added. They laughed. Behind them, Elias passed by on his way out. If he heard them, he gave no sign. Virel watched him go. "I don't understand why the Academy bothers," she said. "There are species with real combat traditions waiting for exchange slots." "Politics," someone said. "Symbolism," said another. Virel nodded. That made sense. The galaxy liked symbols. Later that week, the cohort began a long-term field exercise in the Academy's controlled wilderness zone. No weapons, no combat. The focus was coordination, resource management, and leadership. Under pressure. Teams were assigned randomly. Virel's team included a heavy-gravity world engineer, a medic from a low-light species, an atmospheric analyst, and Sergeant Elias Ward. Of course. The transport set them down near a rocky valley with scattered vegetation and a narrow river cutting through the center. Their objective was to establish a stable forward operations camp and maintain it for 5 days while completing rotating problem-solving tasks sent by the instructors. Virel immediately took charge. "We set camp on the ridge," she said. "Good visibility, easy to defend from environmental hazards." The engineer hesitated. "Wind exposure will be higher." "We can anchor structures," Virel said. Elias studied the valley below. "There's natural shelter near the river bend," he said quietly. "Tree cover, water access, less wind." "And less visibility," Virel replied. "We are not hiding." He gave a small nod. "Understood." They built on the ridge. By the second day, wind speeds increased beyond the forecast. Nothing dangerous, but enough to make cooking difficult and rest uncomfortable. Fine dust got into equipment joints. The medic developed mild respiratory irritation. Virel adjusted schedules and doubled anchor lines. It was manageable. That evening, a new task came in. Design a supply distribution system for a mixed-species settlement using limited transport capacity. The team gathered around a portable holo projector. Elias listened while others proposed direct delivery routes based on population size. After a while, he said, "What if we deliver to smaller hubs first, not the biggest one?" The analyst frowned. "That's inefficient." "Short term, yes," he said. "But if smaller hubs stabilize faster, they can support the main one. Reduces total strain." Virel looked at the projections. "He might be right." She didn't say that out loud. "Fine," she said instead. "Run both models." His version performed better over time. On the third day, the river swelled slightly after distant rainfall. Nothing dramatic, just enough to make the lower valley muddy. Elias walked the perimeter of their ridge camp and quietly reinforced drainage trenches. "You expect flooding?" the engineer asked. "No," he said. "I expect water to follow gravity." That night, runoff flowed exactly where he had predicted. Their equipment stayed dry. Virel began watching him when she thought he wouldn't notice. He moved without wasting energy. He asked for help without pride. He gave help without comment. When others grew frustrated with repetitive tasks, he hummed soft, tuneless sounds and kept working. Still, she told herself, this was maintenance work, support work. not the kind of thing legends were made of. On the fourth evening, the cohort gathered at a central checkpoint where instructors reviewed progress. Multiple teams reported structural failures, mismanaged supplies, or internal disputes. Commander Elira stopped at Birel's team last. Camp stability high, she read from her pad. Resource usage efficient. Morale indicators steady. Her gaze shifted briefly to Elias, then back to Virel. Strong leadership. Virel straightened slightly. Thank you, Commander. As the instructors moved on, the medic nudged Elias.
You should have been team lead, they said quietly. He shook his head.
I'm here to learn how others lead. Virel pretended not to hear, though the words stuck with her. That night, she initiated a personal call from her quarters, overlooking the academy's lights. Her mother's image appeared above the console. General Suresh, her plating marked with the subtle patterns of long service. You look tired, her mother said. Field exercise, Virel replied. With the exchange cohort. Learning cooperation. Virel hesitated, then gave a dismissive flick of her hand.
One of them is human. Her mother did not react immediately.
Yes. I don't see the value, Virel continued. Physically unimpressive.
Overly cautious, always planning for the worst instead of seizing advantage. Suresh watched her quietly. And yet you are talking about him. Virel paused.
He notices small things.
Irritating things. Small things keep people alive, her mother said mildly. This isn't a battlefield, Virel said. No, Suresh agreed. It's training. That is where habits form. Virel shifted, uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. He lets others take credit, doesn't assert dominance, doesn't even argue when he's right. Her mother's eyes softened in a way Viel did not understand. What is his name? Virel frowned slightly.
Elias Ward.
There was a long silence. Mother? Suresh exhaled slowly. Ward, she repeated. There were humans with that name in the Kaler evacuation fleets. Different generation, perhaps. Virel blinked. You fought alongside humans?
I survived alongside humans, Suresh corrected gently.
There is a difference. Virel leaned closer to the console. What are they really like? In real crises, her mother's gaze seemed to drift somewhere far away. They ask about water, shelter, and who has not home. They count children before they count ammunition. They make plans that assume something will go wrong, and then they keep going when it does. That sounds like fear, Virel said. Suresh shook her head. No, that is responsibility. Virel had no quick answer to that. Watch him, her mother said softly. You may learn something your instructors cannot teach. The call ended, leaving Virel staring at her own reflection in the dark console screen. The next morning, as the sun rose over the silver plateau and transport ships traced bright lines across the sky, Virel spotted Elias near the edge of the training grounds. He was kneeling beside a broken equipment crate from another team, carefully repairing the latch even though it wasn't part of his assignment. Why are you fixing that? She asked as she approached. He looked up, surprised. They'll need it for the next rotation. They're not your team. He gave a small shrug. Still my problem if they start short on gear. Virel studied him for a long moment. For the first time since arriving at the academy, she did not see a weak species representative or a political symbol. She saw someone who prepared for trouble before it arrived, and quietly carried weight that no one else had noticed was there. She did not bow. Not yet. But for the first time when she looked at the human soldier, she felt the beginning of something unfamiliar. Not amusement. Not pity. Respect was too strong a word. But it was moving in that direction. The weather shifted on the 6th morning without warning. Taravanix was known for calm skies around the Academy Plateau, but the wilderness training zone stretched far beyond the protected areas. Viel woke to a low, distant rumble that vibrated faintly through the ground beneath her sleeping mat. For a moment, she thought it was transport traffic. Then her wrist display flashed a yellow advisory. Atmospheric instability detected. All teams remain in zone unless instructed.
Adapt to conditions. Varel stepped outside the shelter structure.
The sky above the valley had turned a dull gray-green, clouds moving faster than she had ever seen on this world. Wind pulled at the edges of their camp, snapping loose fabric and whistling through anchor lines.
Her team gathered quickly. "Wind speed's rising," said the atmospheric analyst, checking instruments.
This wasn't in the forecast models. Nothing dangerous, the engineer said. Structures are stable. Elias Ward was already tightening the outer tie-downs, moving with calm focus. He glanced once at the sky, then at the river far below. Virel followed his gaze. The water looked darker than usual, surface choppy. "Report," she said sharply. "Pressure drop," the analyst replied. Fast 1. Virel made a decision. "We reinforce and hold position. This is a stability test." No one argued. They had trained for environmental stress before. The wind picked up steadily through the morning. Fine dust from the upper slope swept across the ridge, reducing visibility and stinging exposed skin. Communication with other teams became intermittent, not because of system failure, but because everyone was busy securing their own camps.
Around midday, a new message came through from the instructors. Scenario update. Regional weather event has caused simulated infrastructure damage across multiple zones.
Teams are to establish contact with at least one neighboring unit and coordinate shared resource planning. Mobility challenges expected. Virel read it twice. "We're not just surviving," she said. "We're supporting others." She brought up the map. The nearest team was stationed in the lower valley, near the river bend, the area Elias had suggested for their own camp days ago. The irony did not escape her, though. She said nothing about it. "We send a small group," she decided.
"Assess their status, open a supply link." "I'll go," the engineer said.
"Me too," said the medic. Virel nodded. "Sergeant Ward, you're with them. You know the terrain best." Elias clipped his pack closed. "Yes, ma'am." They set out under a sky that seemed to press lower with every step. The path down from the ridge was steep but manageable. Loose stones slid underfoot, and wind gusts forced them to lean into the slope. Halfway down, the medic paused.
"River's louder," they said. It was.
What had been a steady flow days ago now roared between the banks, water level visibly higher. At the valley floor, they found the other team's camp, or what was left of it. Shelters had been moved farther from the river, but signs of hurried relocation were everywhere. Equipment crates were stacked unevenly. A cooking unit lay on its side. One of the cadets, a tall avian species, waved them over with clear relief.
"Glad to see someone," the avian said. "We underestimated runoff."
"Casualties?" Virel asked. "No injuries, but we lost some stored supplies when the bank collapsed."
Elias crouched near the edge of the camp, studying the ground.
Mud showed clear water paths cutting through where tents had stood earlier. "How high did it get?" he asked. The avian pointed to a line of debris tangled in low branches. It was well above Virel's head.
"That was during the night surge," the avian said. "We moved fast."
Virel looked at the river again. It was still rising, slow but steady. "We'll share dry rations," she said. "Our camp is secure." Elias did not look convinced. He walked a wider circle around the area, boots sinking slightly into the wet soil. When he returned, he spoke quietly.
We should help them move to higher ground.
Not just a little higher, a lot higher.
The avian blinked. We already moved.
The ground here is saturated, Elias said. If upstream flow increases again, the bank could fail further back. The engineer frowned. Forecast didn't predict extreme rainfall. Elias nodded. Forecasts are averages. Storms don't care about averages. Virel felt the eyes of both teams on her. Relocating again would cost time and energy. It would also mean admitting their current position was unsafe. She thought of her mother's words. Small things keep people alive.
New plan, Viral said. We relocate them to the eastern slope.
Tree roots will stabilize soil. Less flood risk. The avian team didn't argue. They had already seen the river's temper once. What followed was hours of hard, steady work. Crates were lifted, shelters dismantled, power units carried up a gradual incline slick with mud. Wind tore at them, and twice Virel had to help a smaller cadet keep their footing. Elias moved constantly between groups, redistributing weight, adjusting straps, suggesting routes that avoided the worst ground. He never raised his voice, but people listened when he spoke. By late afternoon, both teams had a combined camp set on higher terrain. It wasn't pretty, but it was stable. They had barely finished securing the last shelter when the second surge came. A deep, rolling sound echoed through the valley, louder than before. Everyone turned. A wall of darker water pushed down the river channel, churning with branches and debris. It slammed against the outer bank where the old camp had stood. The ground gave way in a long, crumbling collapse. Even from a distance, Virel felt the vibration through her feet. No one spoke for several seconds. Then the medic let out a slow breath. We would have been there. Virel looked at Elias. He was not watching the river anymore. He was checking the new anchor points, as if this were simply the next task. The instructor's drones appeared an hour later, hovering at a respectful distance recording data. No direct help came. This was still a training scenario. Night fell with heavy clouds and steady rain. Inside the shared shelter, cadets from both teams sat close, trading ration packs and quiet conversation. Stress had worn down barriers between species. Someone passed around a heat unit. Another shared a story from their homeworld about storms that lasted entire seasons. Virel sat near the entrance, monitoring conditions. Across from her, Elias carefully dried a soaked navigation pad with a soft cloth.
You expected that, she said.
He glanced up. Expected something, he replied.
Rivers are patient. They look calm right before they change everything.
You didn't argue when I chose the ridge, she said.
It was defensible, he answered. Just not comfortable. That wasn't your call to make. No, ma'am. She studied him in the dim light. Does it not bother you letting others make the wrong choice? He considered that. In my experience, people learn better if they arrive at the lesson themselves. My job is to be ready when they do.
Virel had no response to that. The storm continued through the night but began to weaken by morning. Low clouds clung to the treetops, and the air smelled of wet soil and crushed leaves. A new instructor message arrived. Multiple teams report resource imbalance.
Establish a cross-team supply network using remaining assets. Long-term sustainability now priority.
Viral gathered everyone. We pool inventories, she said.
No separate reserves. There was brief hesitation. Then packs were opened. Items sorted into shared stacks.
Elias suggested a simple tracking system using colored markers on containers so even species with different visual spectrums could identify categories quickly. It was a small thing, but it reduced confusion immediately. By midday, they had mapped out ration schedules, water purification shifts, and rest rotations that accounted for each species' biological needs. It was not heroic work. It was slow, careful, sometimes boring. But no one went hungry. No one overworked themselves into collapse. When the instructors finally signaled the end of the extended scenario 2 days later, transport craft descended through clearing skies onto a landscape that looked very different from the one where the exercise had begun. Erosion scars marked the valley. Fallen branches lay tangled along the riverbanks. Several distant campsites were clearly abandoned and relocated. As Virel's combined team boarded their transport, Commander Elira stood waiting at the hatch. "Report!" she said. "2 teams integrated," Virel said. "No losses. Stable supply chain. Elevated camp secure."
Iria nodded. Her gaze shifted briefly to Elias, then back.
"Well done." Inside the transport, cadets slumped into seats, exhausted but quietly proud. The avian cadet from the Valley team leaned toward Virel. "Your human was right about the river." Virel looked across the cabin. Ella sat with eyes closed, head resting back against the wall, hands still loosely wrapped in the straps of his pack, as if ready to move again at any moment. "Yes," she said slowly. "He was." She realized something then. Strength was not always loud. Leadership was not always about being first to speak or quickest to act. Sometimes it was about noticing the ground was softer than it should be, and caring enough to say something before it gave way. As the transport lifted off and the damaged valley shrank below them, Virel felt her view of the quiet human shift again. Still not a hero in shining armor, but no longer someone she could ever mistake for weak.